Utah went into Waco and came away with the victory. But what can we learn from breaking down the film we're talking about on today's Locked On Utes?
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and where you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you guys like and subscribe. Love interacting with you guys in the YouTube comments as well as on social media, where you can follow our show at Locked On Utes. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Once again, code LOCKEDONCollege, that's all caps, no spaces, Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. And that goes for any tickets, including the ones like this week to the Weber State game or any tickets throughout the season or any college tickets in general. But yeah, so make sure you guys head over and check out that great offer from our friends at Gametime. My name is JT Wistcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. And on today's show, we're breaking down the film of the Baylor game. Also close this up on the very end of just how cool it was to see Dalton Kincaid in the NFL and some of the other Utes who stood out from the very first week, but especially Dalton in general. I just thought it was really cool to see him out there catching passes from someone like Josh Allen, even though he didn't come away with the win, of course. But before we dive into the NFL stuff, gotta start with the college game, of course, and as it pertains to Utah taking on Baylor and what we learned from the game. And start with the offense, then we'll break down the defense in the second segment. But in starting with the offense, first of all, I thought it was very fitting that the offense started with a delay of game penalty, especially unfortunately when Bryson was under center, because that was just kind of a foreshadowing for overall Utah's offensive performance on the game. And then especially with Bryson under center, because it didn't go that well. But we'll talk about Bryson in a second. I am going to go position by position and give my thoughts on everything. So first, talking about the quarterbacks overall, I liked what we saw from Nate, especially. I mean, how could you not late, right? Like even in the first half, he had that nice throw. They put him in the game. We'd only been running him, of course, really whenever he's in the game, hadn't let him throw yet. And he had a nice throw to Vele for about a first down. It was just a good job reading the defense and finding Vele in the middle of the field. So he had a nice throw there. And then look, put him in the game. Utah had the ball in the 12, so he led him on an 88-yard touchdown drive, and it was really impressive. He did a good job going through his reads, making throws. It was 2nd and 15 because he took that sack. I wish he would have thrown that one away, but look, it's Nate Johnson. He's an incredible athlete. I understand why I thought maybe he'd be able to juke the defenders there. So takes not even the sack, but tackle for a loss, whatever you want to call it. Either way, that and then it puts him behind the sticks, and he does a good job. He looks right first and then comes back to Matthews in the middle, who does a good job creating that separation and makes the throw while under duress too. And it was not the last throw he would make under duress. He also had that one where he was rolling out to the right on the move and hit Money Parks in stride too. He made multiple really good throws under duress. Also thought he did a good job going through pressure overall and going through his reads. Now he's not, look, this is the most he's ever thrown the ball in a collegiate game. So there's still things, right? Like Utah's first trip into the red zone, he forces one to Jaquindon Jackson, who ends up with like 3 guys around him. If he had waited an extra second, and there was pressure coming in on him, but I still think he could have gotten, if he would have looked right and then come back to the middle, he would have seen Thomas Yasmin wide open in the end zone for a touchdown. But that's a nitpick because, of course, Nate Johnson would go on to score that touchdown for Utah with good blocking by the offensive line, showing off the speed and getting in the end zone too. So very impressed with what I saw by Nate overall. Like I think Coach Wood even said he's made leaps and bounds as a thrower, and you can tell he's making progress each week. It wasn't a perfect performance by Nate, but man, it was pretty close to a perfect final drive. I'll say that with his execution and what he was able to do, making those throws on the move, his ability to make those throws on the move, his athleticism, he's much better at throwing under duress is the reason he will be the starter as long as Cam is out, because he does it much better than that than Bryson, who, like I said, Nate, very good performance. Unfortunately, Bryson Barnes did not. He really struggled with pressure in his face. And I think the one thing that as I watch Bryson that really frustrates me about him, and this also could be something the coaches get on these guys about, but man, when Bryson gets hit or just like there's bodies around him or anything like that, like if he escapes, he almost always escapes just to run. He doesn't look downfield. And there's multiple times after he got hit, if he would have looked downfield or not tried to force it somewhere, or if he would have just scrambled, even when he's scrambling, looked up, like there are guys open. And he just doesn't see that because once you get hit, it's like his brain just goes into, I got to run, I got to move, pressure's breaking into. So just not the same once he gets hit. He's rushed. He made a couple of nice throws throughout the game, but I say a couple, I only mean like two to kind of five, somewhere in that range. Because look, overall it was a struggle, right? There were multiple sequences where he missed guys, just a load lock in on a read, different things like that. So yeah, Bryson, and the interception was awful. I mean, you just can't throw that ball. I understand, like that was a situation where kind of what I was talking about, right? Like he was trying to run and look downfield, make a play, but that's just one you obviously can't make in that situation because you got to see the DB linebacker, whoever it was that picked it off. You just got to see the defender in that situation. So yeah, just not comfortable. He's got really poor pocket presence, in my opinion. Just as soon as there's multiple times where it's like he feels pressure when it's not really there, the whole seeing ghost thing kind of affects Bryson. So yeah, just Bryson is still a guy. Like if something were, knock on wood, like we want to see Nate Johnson as much as we could. Like if something were to happen with Nate and like Utah to go back to Bryson, they can continue to win games at home and do things because he's still a game manager. If Utah executes, we've seen them win with him in the past. But Nate Johnson is clearly this team's best option at quarterback right now and deserves to be the starter going forward. But I'm not like, if Bryson's ever in the game again, like we're hopeless. It's hard to win on the road in college football, and Utah's defense was the only reason that they were in most of this game, right? With how bad the offense was overall. So but for Nate, like I said, I'm really excited what I saw from him, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing him against Weber State. I'd be shocked if Cam Rising played this week, based in, once again, Coach Witt said like, oh yeah, he's a full participant in practice, but we're still waiting on the full clearance. So that just gives you a sign of kind of where he's at in his recovery and everything. But yeah, so Nate's the guy going forward. Bryson, yeah, just not a good game from him at all. Another thing that I thought was kind of interesting and just something that's kind of been an underrated storyline the last couple weeks. I talked about it a little bit in the first game, but I didn't mention this name specifically. There's a guy on offense that Utah misses, and it's not Dalton Kincaid. It's not even Brain Daniels, who I blanked out his name for a second, because I actually thought Spencer Fano was really good in this game. It's actually Logan Kendall, Utah's blocking tight end for a year ago. You know, they've used him in multiple ways, just a road grader in the run game, a phenomenal blocker up front. Because Miki Sugacharaga at tight end has been very up and down to me. He did have the one drop where Bryson found him on when Utah had that where they lost on downs 4 plays in a row, couldn't move the chains. Second down, Bryson rolls out, does throw, yes, it's a little bit of a low ball, but one, it hits Mickey right in the hands. You got to come down with it. He drops that one too, but did make another grab, I believe, in the game. I remember now because he got hit and then he flipped upside down basically. But still, also, you could tell he's just still new to the position. There are certain times, like there was a run Utah had in the red zone late in the game where Mickey's running and there's no one there for him to block. So he just stops. And Jaquindon, who's running, runs right into his back. It's like you can't do that in that situation. But the very next play, then he works his way up and helps on a double team to open the sprint. I think it was the Nate touchdown or it was a run that set up the eventual touchdown. But either way, so Mickey's been kind of up and down as a blocker. He's been beat a couple times, still working on just the technique of the position overall, feel for it, blocking through the whistle, all that stuff. So Mickey at tight end's been a little up and down too, but I do see why Utah moved him there. I think he's shown some growth still and potential, but still making mistakes too. And as for Utah's other tight end, of course, Thomas Yasmin, average blocker. He makes mistakes in the run game too, but his strength allows him to get away with stuff still because he is just that extreme of an athlete. And he's also a guy that we know how much Cam Rising loves the tight end position. And who knows, maybe with more reps, maybe Yasmin will have a big game here too. But he was open a couple times in this game. And I think once Cam is back is when we'll see Yasmin used more so towards his potential, because I think he has the ability to still make some special plays for this Utah offense. And like I said, I just think because of the quarterback, whether it's Nate, who's just still getting comfortable as a thrower, or Bryson, who really struggled in this game, they're missing him in a couple occasions. And I think Yasmin has a lot of potential to do some really good stuff for this team too. But yeah, that's only 2 positions on the offense. That's how much I had to say on the quarterbacks and tight ends. Still haven't even gotten to the running backs, receivers, O-line, and a lot of stuff on the defense too. And you know what? I didn't answer my question. Why did Utah's offense have success late? It was a combination of Nate Johnson playing really well at quarterback, the Utah running backs breaking tackles, Mikey Matthews creating separation, the offensive line executing. And I will say, just as throwing a caveat, Baylor also, I thought, made some mistakes. They played really soft coverage, and they gave Mikey Matthews the first one. Mikey Matthews ended up lined up on a linebacker. Like, good job by Utah exploiting that. But if you're Baylor, you just don't want that to happen, where you have a shifty route runner like Mikey Matthews and a linebacker's trying to cover him. That's not good there. And then there was other points. Mikey Matthews had grabs where there's just those quick slants are open because of how soft the coverage is. So it allows Utah to move the field down the chain. So most of the reason Utah had success was good Utah, but definitely some bad Baylor stuff mixed in there too. But yeah, we still got to finish up, as I mentioned, closing out the offense and dive into the defensive game film too. But before we dive into all of that, I do want to tell you guys a little bit more about that great offer I mentioned earlier from our friends at Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite events, it shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They have great deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee. You can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped over all the fun you have. They have flash deals on last-minute tickets, and it's easy to just find and buy tickets for every kind of event and area. So many ticket websites, it makes it complicated. Are you getting a good deal? What's your seat view going to look like? That's something that's great about Gametime. They allow you to have an image of your seat, so you're not going to be tricked into thinking that your view isn't going to be less than what it looked like because you have the image of the seat view, which is really nice. They also have the low price guaranteed and event cancellation protection, job loss protection, etc. And I mentioned that low price guaranteed. They also have the Gametime guarantee, which means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Also, want to tell you guys about an exciting thing we have going on here at the Locked On College Network, where we have Locked On College Football Kickoff, the Locked On College Football Kickoff live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern, so 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Mountain Time on every Locked On College YouTube channel. So if you guys want to tune into the show, in which they'll be covering the playoff implications, the biggest games each week, and the biggest storylines, you can find that each Friday by the Locked On Locked On Utes channel or whatever Locked On shows you're listening to. It'll be available there as long as it's Locked On College channel related. Drake Toll, Alex Dono, the whole crew, they do a great job. So make sure you guys check out Locked On College Football Kickoff live every Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Locked On College YouTube channel. You won't want to miss it. Alrighty, diving back into the film. Let's go back to the running backs a little bit. We talked about quarterbacks, and I slipped in a quick thing on the tight ends. Jaquindon Jackson and Jalen Glover were both great in this game, I thought. They both broke multiple tackles, showed exceptional vision. Jaquindon Jackson had the biggest play for Utah in the first half when he had that long 30-yard run. He broke at least 3, if not 4 tackles on that play. Like, the offensive line did a good job executing too, but like there was at least 3 tackles he broke on that play before he showed off the elite speed that almost got Utah in position to score a touchdown, but there was a tough holding call. Actually, that was an accurate holding call. There was a holding call on Mokafisi in that one, and we'll get into the later holding calls on Mokafisi. I didn't agree with those, but this one, Mokafisi was pulling across, and the defensive end, usually as a puller, you're taught to stay tight to the line. This DN just flew really far upfield, and Moko wanted to get a hand on him, so he ended up grabbing the shoulder pads, and not just like grabbing inside, like he's running straight and then like he extends his arm out to grab him. Like, that's an obvious holding. So I thought that was a fair call there that stumped that Utah drive. But yeah, Jalen had some awesome plays late. As I mentioned, I do like that he scored the touchdown. I mentioned this on yesterday's show. You take the guaranteed points to me. I've seen too many teams like just lose it by trusting up for their kicker and all of that. And I just trust the Utah defense to make the stop and make the stand as they did, even if it was a little close for comfort. But Jalen and Jaquindon are going to be very potent as Utah's 1-2 running back punch. It does sound like we're going to see more Chris Curry going forward too. Obviously, just a very difficult situation with what happened with Mekhi Bernard, but the running back room does have some depth in it. So I was very encouraged by what I saw from Jalen and Jaquindon in this game. Both I thought played really good games, breaking tackles, showing off the vision, dragging defenders for extra yards too. I think both these guys are going to be stars on this Utah offense. Jaquindon, especially this year, and Jalen next year. Jalen could be the best player on this offense next year. I think he's got a chance to do that. Moving on. Then let's talk about the wide receivers. As I mentioned, Mikey Matthews popped late, just such a strong route runner. 2nd and 15, shook the linebacker out of his cleats on the nice little in route there, and broke another tackle to guarantee the first down. And then, thanks to Baylor for playing that soft coverage and allowing him to work, because he is such a shifty and crafty route runner. He's able to create that separation because there's so much space between him and the Baylor defenders because they're playing so far off of where he is. He's able to make those easy grabs. So many defenses get themselves in trouble by playing prevent and like getting nervous late in the games, not giving up the big play. And that's in some ways what happened there. But do credit Mikey Matthews for creating that separation. Money Parks also made a couple nice grabs too. Vele had 1 or 2 good plays. He should have had even more. He was one especially. I felt like that Bryson missed multiple times throughout the game. Vele, I saw some people mention it like Mikey and Money being the best receivers on this team right now. I think Vele is going to work his way back in there once Cam gets back, or even with Nate in there. I think he'll get more opportunities. They already connected once in this game, him and Nate did. So I'm still really high on Vele. Even Emery Simmons a couple times, like he's popped open both these games once or twice. Like I still think he's going to pop a big play, whether it's with Nate or once Cam gets back healthy. So I'm still pretty high on this Utah receiving core. I think they're capable of making some plays, and I think very soon they're going to get some opportunities to do so, whether it's with Cam or if Nate Johnson continues to develop and grow as a passer in general. So really liked what I saw from the receivers too overall. And I thought Utah's passing game issues for the most part this game were not due to their inability to get open, but Bryson's struggles reading the defense and just getting comfortable in the pocket. And overall, I thought the offensive line gave him a good amount of time. Utah, I saw Baylor's defense was credited with 3 sacks. I didn't feel like it watching it. I do remember the one that they have, I think late, like at one point in the game where they swung Bryson down. But yeah, overall, I felt like the offensive line did a pretty good job. Gave up those 3 sacks, as I mentioned. I thought Fano was much better this week. I thought last week, he had 3 penalties, I think, a couple of missed blocks. I thought there's still going to be a few mistakes there, but everyone on the offensive line made mistakes. I thought Fano was pretty good. In fact, this is where it's like a push and tug thing, but like I think you could make an argument that Fano was Utah's best tackle in this game. I thought Satawa definitely had a little bit of a down game in this one, got beaten pass protection a couple times, beaten the run game too in general. So credit for Baylor for making it tough on him. Satawa still played pretty good overall, but definitely beat more in this game than he was against Florida too. So overall, still a solid performance by both the Utah's tackles, though, especially Fano, as I mentioned, really encouraged by his growth and development. I did not like the holding calls on Milkafisi, the 2 in the second half, especially the one on the Jaquindon Jackson touchdown run. I felt like he was still inside. I felt like the linebacker just kind of giving up. He flailed his hands in the air. And the ref who was actually closest to the play, the one who was standing in the middle of the field, he didn't throw his flag. I've watched it back a couple times, unless he just like got it stuck and threw it after the camera got off. I think it was another ref who didn't have as good of an angle. So I didn't like that. I feel like Moko did a good job keeping those hands inside, as I mentioned, and I don't think that should have been a flag. And even the one earlier, I felt like he was still in a good enough position. I didn't feel like that was an egregious holding either. I felt like both the ones that were called on Mokafisi is the type of blocking you see every single play. You genuinely can call holding on every single play. And I thought those were just examples of like, because of the location of it is why Moko was called. Like if that was on the line of scrimmage, I don't think it's called. And I don't even, once again, I don't think that was holding. I think that's legal what he was doing, keeping his hands inside. And yeah, I disagreed with that call, but it didn't matter. Utah got the first down and scored later anyway. So that's that. And Kump and Keaton Bills were also pretty good overall. Both had little mistakes here and there in the run game, misses, stuff like that. But that's just kind of normal stuff in general. Utah's offense was very one-dimensional, so it also very, very much hurt them. There were multiple times that Utah would run it. You got the 5 blockers, but sometimes you're facing 6. There was one time that Utah had 8 guys in the block, but they were facing a 9-man box. So that's where that one guy was able to come up and limit what would have been a really big run to a 4-yard gain only because everyone does their job. There's just too many to block. That's where having Cam back and Nate could get there as a passer. They will not respect Nate's arm until he continues to grow. Defenses won't, but hopefully that's where Nate can make them pay, and then they will expect his arm, and then the backs will free up a little bit. Although with what a good runner Nate is, that's going to be tough to do just in general overall. So yeah, so the offensive line I thought was really good overall, as I mentioned, and yeah, just very encouraged about this Utah offense right now to be 2-0 against 2 solid Power 5 programs with backup quarterbacks, both of which making like Bryson May's first ever start with the game plan being designed for him. Nate getting his first couple snaps in these last 2 weeks operating the offense, and you're 2-0 with one of those being a road win in Waco. I think is really encouraging. So I'm liking when I see how this Utah offense. And I thought Andy Ludwig did a good job, or in Kyle Whittingham, however he was involved in that too, making the switch to go with Nate in that scenario. I thought that was the best call there. So yeah, as I mentioned, that will do it for our offense talk. I do want to dive into this defense, though, in a second. I got a lot to say about the defense, but first, want to talk, especially Utah's second half defense, because they showed some special things. But first, got to talk to you guys about our great friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from the spread to the player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Hope your guys' NFL teams won, but even if they didn't in week 1, you're feeling good about the matchups they got in week 2, head over to FanDuel. Capitalize on some great odds and deals that they have going on over there. So let's talk about this Utah defense. First half, they got pushed around a little bit, right? Front 7 especially was gashed a little bit in the run game. Also credit their receivers, honestly, throughout the game. Made a couple of really tough grabs. The passing game wasn't there overall for Baylor, but they did make a couple of just like big plays because of the one jump ball their receiver run. He just out jumped, I believe it was Zamaya Vaughn and Cole Bishop there. Credit him for making that play. But let's go back to the front 7. The defensive line really got pushed around early, and I thought the change from the first half to the second half was actually as simple as one guy, and other guys played better too. But it was Junior Tafuni. You could tell it was his first game back. I mentioned on yesterday's show, there was one play in particular. He got pancaked. He was just pushed around a little bit more in the first half, and the Utah defensive line was in general. Junior Tafuna was the dominant force that led to RG3 and Bob Wischusa naming him like the impact defensive player at the beginning of the broadcast. Junior Tafuna in the second half was a man on a mission, and he was an elite run-stuffing defensive tackle. Did a great job engaging with guys and flowing to the ball, controlling his gap. There was one stretch run in particular where I believe it was Lander Barton actually got pushed back in the second half, and it would have been pretty easy for the Baylor back to turn the corner and get a first down when the Bears were in the red zone, and Junior drove his guy back, so it's caused the run to be stretched out. Like, it just took the back longer to be able to turn the corner, and by the time he was able to, Lander was able to get around his block and push the guy to bounds. That's only possible because of Junior's big play. So also did a really good job taking on double teams. In the first half, he did get pushed around, but in the second half especially, and even towards the end of the first half, he had a couple stops where Junior Tafuna looked like the Junior Tafuna that was Pac-12 Defensive Freshman of the Year, and that was the dominant force on last year's Pac-12 championship team. So really loved what I saw from Junior Tafuna. He is his team's best run defending defensive tackle. Oh, Keanu Tanuvasa made some nice plays too. He had the Utah had scored their touchdown. It was the first play of the second to last drive for Baylor, the one that ended with the Cole Bishop interception. Tanuvasa shoots through two offensive linemen, makes a tackle for loss right there. So really love what I've seen from Keanu Tanuvasa, just an explosive defensive tackle, uses his hands very well, got the sack last week, but he did a good job taking on his assignments too, holding his gaps, freeing up linebackers to come in and make plays. So credit those two in particular. Those two are Utah's best two defensive tackles right now. Aliki Vaimahi, David Fotu, both came in and made nice plays in this game, but Tafuna and Tanuvasa are the two that really popped off the tape to me from a defensive tackle standpoint, and I thought they deserve a lot of credit for Utah's strong run defensive performance. But I also give credit to the trio of Jonah Ellis, Logan Fano, and Van Fillinger. And also, hopefully, we'll get Connor O'Toole back in a couple weeks. Coach Witt said he will be back in the next about week or so, I believe, was the quote he had in his press conference today. But yeah, I said this before. Coach Witt called O'Toole the best pass rusher. I really want to see it because Jonah Ellis just continues to make things happen to me. He had a really nice spin move late in this game and just does a good job breaking. There was also a holding call. He got held one time, might have gotten a sack, and they don't call it. There was a blatant one, too. That was like Moko levels where, like I said, like the guy's arm is like draped across his chest, and that's the only thing preventing him from getting to the quarterback. It's not like he's locked up with him inside, cutting him off with his body like Moku was on his holding earlier. So love that I've seen from Jonah. Fano is such an incredible athlete off the edge, and his speed and quickness, and very good hit with his hands as well. And then Van made some nice plays too on the edge. We know he's an elite run defender, and I really like him rushing from the interior. He did have a couple pressures, or I think just one in particular, rushing from the interior. So this is a really elite defensive line that Utah's got, especially once you get the three I feel the best about right now are Junior, Tanuvasa, and then Jonah Ellis for all three downs. And then if it's third and long, I want Fano in, and probably first and second right now I like Van. And Van's a little bit stronger, so a better run defender. But Fano's a better athlete and more explosive, so he's the better pass rusher. So good to have depth along this defensive line, and that's without Simote Pepa still coming back hopefully soon. So very excited about this position, the Utah defensive line, and man, it was great to see Junior Tafuna really wreck the Baylor Bears run game in the second half. But also responsible with wrecking that run game was the linebackers. I thought Leavani Damuni played really well all game long. He was one of the top guys for Utah in terms of tackles, did a good job getting around offensive linemen and making plays. Thought Lander Barton struggled a little bit in the first half getting off blocks, but in the second half especially, he had the blitz late in the game that he was the one that forced the interception Cole Bishop had. He also had another one where he shot through a gap and made a huge tackle. And yeah, just throughout the second half, really, I thought Lander Barton really popped off the screen too, just flying all over the field, making plays, doing a good job getting off of blocks too. And I do think Utah missed Corene Reed in the first half, missed him a little less in the second half, but they'll be excited to get Corene Reed back in the near future, just because it's nice to have three really elite linebackers to me. And Damuni and Barton, I thought those two played pretty well overall for most of the game. As I mentioned, Lander struggled a little in the first half, but just in totality, those two were really good in this one. And excited to get Corene Reed back too, so you can keep those, just either two of those guys on the field at all times, or just continue to keep them fresh overall, because those are three really good linebackers. And I do believe, after watching it back, I think that should have been a fumble where Lander Barton laid the wood on one of their running backs. I believe he caught the ball, took two steps, turned. As I understand the rule, that should have constituted as a football move, especially when it was the call on the field. I just don't think there was enough there to overturn it. If it was called the other way, I would have understood if they kept it that way. But since it was called on the field, I thought it was a fumble in real time. I do think it should have stayed a fumble, but at the end of the day, not that big of a deal, because as we know, Utah won. Then let's go to the Utah corners. Solid overall, really good. The one thing I don't like that I mentioned as a Florida, it wasn't as much of a concern, but it showed up against Baylor a little too. They have gotten beat a couple times, and there was at least 2 or 3 throws in this game where Baylor, if they had connected, could have had like 60+ yard touchdowns, like long touchdowns. And Utah's corners, Vaughn and Broughton in particular, that I saw, do a really good job of sitting on the short stuff. But then when you get athletes running at you full speed, you really got to just flip those hips, turn and run quicker, in my opinion. And they've been beat over the top a couple times in this one. And sometimes they got burned. Sometimes the Baylor quarterback missed the throw, but Caleb Williams isn't going to miss that throw. Michael Penix isn't going to miss that throw. Bo Nix isn't going to miss that throw. So that's just something Utah has to clean up on a little bit. And I know maybe that's on Utah's safeties a little bit too, to be over the top, but there's a lot of things going on. And yeah, those guys got beat behind them a couple times too. So that's a small concern, but overall, still really good games from JT Broughton, Zamiah Vaughn in this one. Zamiah Vaughn with the great interception. JT Broughton had a couple nice just coverage in general, where he just did a good job. There's one touchdown in the end zone. He was targeted, did a great job passing off the twist with, I forgot who the other corner was in that situation. So still really like what I've seen from Utah's top two corners. And Teo Johnson made some nice plays in this one too. Still a little, I think he got beat once, but still overall like what I've seen from Teo too. He had a huge tackle in the run game. One time they tried to set up a screen, shot right through and made a huge stop. Let's talk about Miles Battle going for his stuff. Yeah, that one big pass he gave up at the end of the game, that one was unfortunate because he was in the position to make the stop. He just didn't time. He just jumped too early. Had he waited a little bit longer and ran instead of jumping, he would have easily knocked that ball out of bounds. And then we don't even get to his pass interference. I keep the same thoughts I had on yesterday's show. If that had happened at any point in the game outside of the final 2 minutes, I believe it's probably called pass interference. I do agree with Coach. I disagree with Coach Witt. I know he said that he thought it was a good no call, and I guess I agree it was a good no call for the circumstances. Once again, them not calling it there is consistent with what they've done in the final 2 minutes. They do not want to decide the outcome of a game unless it is blatantly obvious, like grabbing a guy, dragging him down, like a fierce hold. I don't think they're going to call it. Zamiah Vaughn does restrict the Baylor receiver from jumping. He has his arm over his other arm, and it's just really, there's a lot of contact there. So I was good with the no call because of the situation. Most other points in the game, that was probably pass interference. But also, I still don't think it made that big of a difference because I just don't. You go to the next play, they get another 15 yards. I still don't think they score on that next pass after that. Sawyer Robertson, I know he just lofted that one up. Who's to say even if he didn't interfere, he probably wasn't going to make that grab anyway. So that's another thing too. We're just in general, I feel like if it wasn't, didn't make that much of a difference. Final thing to talk about as it relates to this Utah defense, and I will actually slide in. How encouraging was it for Cole Becker to continue blasting those PATs? Jack Bomeister, as I blanked out his name for a second, another strong punting outing, and Micah Pittman with that really strong return. It was really unfortunate that I believe it was his first or second punt return of the game that Utah wasn't able to do anything with it after he did a great job showing off the speed, squeezing it down the right sideline to get Utah over the 50. But the last group I want to talk about is Utah's safeties. Sione Vaki and Cole Bishop are, I still believe, the best safety tandem in the Pac-12 and one of the best in the country. Cole Bishop had huge plays all game long, clutch tackles for loss, also with that interception, and just always flying across the field making plays. And same thing with Sione Vaki. Sione Vaki's always there to prevent a big play, great at tackling in space too. Just an elite safety tandem, does a good job of limiting offenses through the air, and they're both elite run defenders. Utah's lucky to have both those guys. I can't say enough good things about them. I think they're both tremendous players on the back end. And yeah, I'm just excited to continue to I'm just glad they get to continue to have opportunities. And it's awesome that Vaki already has one interception and Bishop already has one interception on the season, because those guys deserve the kind of more flashy stats like that, like interceptions, because they make so many other plays that don't get unnoticed, whether it's, or even just the tackles they do. It's like, that's such a clutch, crucial tackle, because if it wasn't for that stop right there, it's a 20-yard gain, or just, it could be a huge first down momentum swing. But Bishop and Vaki both do a great job coming down to run support, getting around those blocks, and making plays when their team need it most. So overall, really encouraged by this Utah team. They deserve to be, they're ranked 12th in the AP poll. I still believe they deserve to be there. They don't have their starting quarterback, and they don't have their top pass catcher, and they're down multiple other starters, and they're 2-0 despite playing two Power 5 teams. I believe Utah and Colorado, I saw, are actually the only two teams that have done that. I might have fallen victim to some fake report thing if there are other schools, but we know that Utah and Colorado for sure have. And of course, both those schools are 2-0 in there. So just another notch for the Pac-12 in general. Speaking of the Pac-12, make sure you guys tune in tomorrow. I'll be having Spencer McLaughlin on my show. We're going to talk about where Utah ranks in the Pac-12, just the overall depth and strength of the Pac-12. That'll be on tomorrow's show. But before we get out of here, I did think we should take an opportunity quick just to talk about how cool it was to see Dalton Kincaid in the NFL. And that looked like Dalton Kincaid out there too, right? Just doing a great job finding the soft spots against zone coverage, just so good at getting open, making those tough grabs that he does. He had 4 catches for 26 yards, no touchdowns in this one. And of course, the Bills did lose to the Jets in just a wild game, and everything that occurred in that contest. But yeah, love seeing Dalton out there. It's cool, especially for me. Dalton was one of the first players I ever interviewed when I was an intern inside the athletic department. So to know, like, just to be like, wow, I interviewed someone and he's catching passes from from Josh Allen is sick. Just like I interviewed the very first athlete I ever interviewed with the athletic department was Terrell Burgess. So to like be like, wow, I interviewed a Super Bowl champion. It's something cool. It's something cool like that. And it's the same thing with just in general. Like I never interviewed Devin Lloyd, but I love watching Devin Lloyd play football because he went to the University of Utah. Never interviewed Britton Covey, Marcus Williams. Loved watching them do their thing too. And Devin Lloyd, 3 tackles, helped the Jags get a win. Britton Covey had that awesome punt return that went viral a little bit. Marcus Williams, I believe he got hurt again, I heard, but he did help limit the Texans offense for the Ravens too. So just great to see all these various Utes going out there and making plays. And as I said, especially Dalton became such a fan favorite for these past 2 years, just especially last year for his just the big plays and just what a special playmaker he turned out to be. And it was cool to see him get off to play so many snaps, get off to a strong start, and make his impact in game 1. And it's only going to continue to go up from here. So excited to see what Dalton's going to continue to do, and just excited to continue to watch Utes in the NFL because it's just a great reminder about what the Utah brand, it's just in that next position where you grow into number one. Who doesn't love watching like good people and just good players succeed? That's what all 4 of the guys I already mentioned do, and could throw in Aleki Fotus on the Cardinals too, and so many other NFL players that have come from Utah in general. But also just speaks to the position the Utah football program is in, that they're putting out so much NFL talent. So once again, really excited about the Utah football brand right now, and just looking forward to continuing to watch it grow in general because they're 2-0 right now, and the train ain't slowing down. So that's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. As I mentioned, tomorrow, Spencer McLaughlin will be joining me. We'll talk about where Utah ranks in the Pac-12 amongst all the other teams. 8 teams ranked for the Pac-12 in the AP Top 25. Pretty cool. And if Utah were to somehow stay undefeated or be a one-loss conference champion, sounds like a resume because of all the teams, the ranked opponents you'd have wins against that could be college football playoff bound potentially. We'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow too. And also talk about the value of playing FCS schools, as Utah does, of course, have a game this week against Weber State. That will all be on tomorrow's Locked On Utes. We'll see you then.